When I was about 5, I shared a room with my younger sister. We had bunk beds. I had top and always kept the TV on and the door open. One night, it must have been around 1 a.m., I woke up. I glanced over at my door and saw a man. He was dressed in a black suit. The only thing that was visible were his hands, which were a pale blue. His head wasn't a normal human head. It was like those dead bull skulls you see in cartoons in deserts. It had horns that reached to the top door frame. He stood there motionless. I was terrified. I looked down and couldn't move. My body was frozen. Finally, I mustered the courage and screamed for my mother. I don't remember anything after that. Another time, in the same house, we had a playroom right next to our dining room. Well, I was talking to my uncle, and I'd open the door and close it, open it and close it. I didn't slam it, just pushed it. Well, I sat down to eat. The door was open, and it just slammed closed. I was around 6/7. Yet again, in the same house, my cousin was babysitting my 2 sisters and me. I was sitting down colouring at a table right by the hallway which had my room in it. It was pretty late at night, and we had a lamp on in the living room. I kept feeling a sense of dread and fear. I looked down the dark hallway, and nothing would be there, yet it felt as if someone or something was standing right at the end of the hallway in front of my bedroom door. I felt like something bad was gonna happen. The lights suddenly went off. I ran across my cousin and sisters on the couch, trying to get as far away from the hallway as possible. I felt like something was gonna grab me. In later years, I stayed at my aunt's with my cousins, younger sis, and their friend. We were telling ghost stories and laughing them off. We had a camera and took a picture of the front door, which was glass. You can see the silhouette of the thing I saw in my doorway when I was 5 first story. Another time, I took a picture of my window because I felt like I was being watched. There's a clear, white face in my window. Couldn't see it with my eyes. Just when I took a picture, that window was 9 feet off the ground. My house was on stilts. I am a 55-year-old man and a practicing scientist for more than 30 years. One night last summer, while lying in bed, I had what I can only classify as an encounter with ancient and powerful but purely evil beings that rule to some degree in the spirit and physical world. I had just laid down after turning the light off in a hotel room that I was staying at in Ohio. My mind is usually thinking about work or some family issue before I drift to sleep on most nights. Inexplicably, I saw in my mind the inside of what seemed like a cave of brown, clay-like walls. 2 entities were in the cave and both spoke, inviting me to join them. I never saw them, but only heard their voices speaking in my mind. The cave seemed to be their home or prison. I could not tell which. I could tell that intellectually I was no match for them, as they seemed to have read me like a book, anticipating anything that I would think or say. They were keeping their overwhelming aptitude hidden so as to not alarm me. I also sensed that they possessed a hidden but very real malevolence and were cold, unfeeling beings who would use me for their purposes and destroy me in the process. They continued by telling me to renounce God's Holy Spirit, and I could enjoy all of the lustful desires of my heart for power, fame, and wealth. I was stunned and did not answer a word, and the conversation ceased and the image disappeared. I am not really sure what precipitated the encounter, but I had been studying about ancient demons who corrupted man before Noah's flood. I think these could have been the same ones, but for sure it shook me to the core of my soul that I could be tempted in such a manner. Thank God he did not allow me to succumb to such a thing. I have had no more encounters like that one, but I realized from it how weak and vulnerable that men are to such beings. No amount of learning or knowledge put me on par with those I encountered. About 12 years ago, I worked swing shifts in South Central Alaska, leaving work for the 70-plus mile trip home around midnight each night. Part of the commute included a narrow, twisty road with dense woods on either side. The night in question was around mid-October, getting close to Halloween, but far too early for people to be dressing up in costumes. I was heading down the narrow, twisty road around 1 a.m., pitch black out except for my not-so-good headlights. Coming around a corner, I was startled to see what at first I thought was a man standing on the edge of the road. Instinctively, I hit the brakes, slowing down to maybe 10 mph, intending to stop and ask the fellow if he needed help. I quickly realized it was not a man, though. It was standing upright but shaped wrong. The shoulders were too large and hunched, the neck and head too far forward. The face, which was not looking at me but towards the trees on the other side of the road, had a suggestion of a muzzle. There were ragged, uneven spikes running down its back. Once fully in the headlights, it was clear the thing was black and looked sort of scaly. As my brain absorbed all this in the space of about 2 seconds, I next assumed it was some sort of well-done Halloween gimmick, though why it was placed out in the middle of nowhere at midnight was beyond me. I had now slowed down to about 5 mph and was nearly alongside it. Then it turned its head towards me. The way it moved, and the eyeshine reflected in its eyes, there is no way that thing wasn't alive. I panicked and slammed on the gas, almost going into the ditch. I drove recklessly fast all the way home. I avoided that road at night for years after. In hindsight, it occurs to me it may have been a black bear with mange or something. They are about man-size and stand on their hind legs regularly. Its skin would have been dark and scaly. The spikes could have been clumps of matted fur seen in profile. But I just don't know. It still creeps me out. On a nearby road, I once saw what I call the lava ball roll across the road. It was about the size of a car tire, crusty black on the outside with yellow/reddish glow shining through random cracks, much like cooling lava. It was spherical and rolled from the right side of the road to the left before disappearing into the trees. I haven't got the foggiest idea what that might have been. One day a mother went to a voodoo shop and got her daughter a doll. She brought it home to her daughter. Her daughter loved it very much and slept with it that night. The little girl laid her new doll beside her on her bed as she lay down to sleep. Later that night she was awoken by a sound. It sounded like someone was walking down the stairs. She went to pick up her doll, and she realized that the doll was gone. She slowly opened the door, walked slowly down the hall, and peered around and down the staircase. There, sitting on the steps, was her new doll. "How did you get there?" asked the little girl. The little girl went and picked up the doll and brought her back to her room. She laid back down with the doll beside her and went back to sleep. 3 hours later she heard the same sound. She noticed that her doll was gone again. She walked down the hall, and there, sitting halfway down the steps, was her doll again. "How did you get there?" asked the little girl again. She walked down the steps, grabbed her doll, and proceeded to her room. She laid back in her bed with her doll sitting beside her. Later that same night she heard the sound a third and final time, with her doll again missing. "This is very strange," the little girl thought to herself. She walked out of her room, looked down the stairs. No one was there, not even her doll. She walked down the stairs. She went around the corner into the kitchen. The knife drawer was open. She went to her parents' bedroom to tell them what she had saw. Leading out of her parents' bedroom were red, bloody footprints. They were rather small, even smaller than hers. She went into her parents' room to ask what had happened, but her parents weren't in their room. She followed the footsteps. They led her outside, where on a tree hung her dead parents. In front of them was her doll sitting on the ground. Next to the doll was a bloody knife. The little girl fell to her knees and started sobbing. Then the unimaginable happened. The doll stood up, smiled and said, "Don't be sad, little girl. Soon you will be with them and you won't have to be sad any more." "What do you mean?" replied the little girl. The doll bent down slowly, grabbed the knife, and ran at the little girl. The little girl's screams echoed through the neighborhood. All the neighbors awoke, but the little girl was nowhere to be found. All they found was a note lying on the ground. The note read, "To whom is reading this, the little girl is fine. All she wanted was to be with her parents once again, and her wish was granted. If you wish you could see one of your loved ones again, just walk inside the front door and I will grant your wish. Sincerely, the little girl's best friend." Some say that if you listen real carefully, you can still hear her shrill cries for help. The little girl's death, along with her neighbors as well, are still a mystery to this day. So remember, if your mom ever goes to a small shop in the middle of nowhere to get you a doll, just tell her you want a pony instead. It may save you some trouble. I had a strange occurrence happen to me recently. I was taking a walk in the woods on my grandfather's land, 175 acres, as I often do. I enjoy the woods because I get a sense of connectivity with the natural world while I am in it. However, that day was different. I felt a strange feeling as I got farther and farther into the woods. It was a lot like feeling lonely, but it had a feeling of dread with it. I was more confused than anything because I spend most of my time in the woods and blamed it on my medicine. I walked further and came upon my father's tree stand. I climbed up and just chilled while I read some books I'd brought with me. I lost track of time while I read and looked up, saw the sun was setting. I was about to leave when it hit me. Ever since I had that feeling, the wood had been silent. Most people probably know this, but the forest is never quiet. Something is always making noise, but I heard nothing. It felt as if I was the only living thing in the world, and a sense of desperation started to descend on me. I looked around and saw nothing, and so I assumed that it was safe to leave, but I looked up and saw a vision that filled my heart with dread. I wouldn't call them black-eyed children, but they were made of shadow. In the top of the tree sat 3 humanoid figures. One was tall, maybe 7 FT, and when I looked at it I felt threatened. One was about average height, and it seemed friendly, or at least indifferent. And the third one surprised me the most. I could tell it was female. The silhouette was definitely female, and it gave me a very friendly vibe, so to speak. I almost said hi when the tall one reached towards me, and I knew it was time to leave. I jumped from the tree stand, miraculously managing not to hurt myself. I'm not a fast runner, but I ran till I reached my grandparents' house. All the way back, I felt something run in the trees above me, presumably the girl. Shadow, judging from the tone of laughter I heard whilst running. When I got to the cornfield between the woods and the house, the laughter stopped and I felt normal. I decided to post this here to avoid being called crazy. I want advice on whether to go back in the woods. I like the outdoors, and the shadows, aside from the tall one, intrigued me more than they scared me. Are they some kind of guardians or something? They didn't seem especially demonic.